Now, the airstrikes on the Houthis in Yemen today were the first real military attack by the West in quite some time. Of course, we didn't get militarily involved in Ukraine, and nor have we with Israel. Now, I know a lot of people probably have reservations given what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. The debate has always raged about whether it's the job of the US to be the policeman of the world and try to impose our interests on the Middle East. But what happened today was unavoidable. The Houthi movement is an Iranian-backed Islamist terror organisation. Their slogan is "God is the greatest, death to America, death to Israel, a curse upon the Jews, victory to Islam." It's pretty obvious what they're on about. They've carried out at least 26 attacks on ships in the Red Sea since November 19, including the Galaxy Leader, which they hijacked at gunpoint and then took back to Yemen. Now, the Houthis say these attacks are in response to Israel's war on Gaza. The Galaxy Leader is owned by a company that is co-owned by an Israeli businessman, but it was operated by a Japanese company, and none of the crew on board were Israeli. It's now being used as some kind of tourist attraction in Yemen, would you believe? Many of the other boats attacked have had no obvious connection to Israel at all. They this week launched their biggest attack yet, with drones and missiles that were shot down by the US and the UK. Now, I've said all along that what's happening in the Middle East at the moment isn't just about Israel versus Hamas, it's about the West versus the rest. It was abundantly clear in all of those demonstrations through our cities. You just scratch below the surface, and those people aren't just there to say they're upset at the deaths of Palestinian civilians. It's about their complaints with Australia, their complaints with the US, their disdain for our Western values. From the river to the sea, as we know, basically means the elimination of Israel. None of it's about ending the war, it's about defeating the West. And so it has been with the Houthis in the Red Sea. Palestine is the excuse. We're standing in solidarity with Gaza. But it's actually about Iran using a proxy group to attack the West. Much like Israel had no choice but to retaliate against Hamas on October 7, the West has no choice but to retaliate against the Houthis for attacking us. The Red Sea is one of the most important trade routes in the world. About 12% of all global trade and 30% of cargo shipping moves through the Red Sea. Allowing these attacks to continue could bring global trade to its knees, and that's what Iran would ultimately like to achieve. Eliminating Israel is one thing, but they would wipe out the entire West, given half the chance. But there are a couple of issues here. The first is that the US has continued to give billions of dollars to Iran. Joe Biden gave them $6 billion in September to help secure the release of 5 Americans. Now, the money was meant to be for humanitarian purposes, but God knows where it ended up. Then he freed up another $10 billion for Iran in November. Iran funds Hamas, it funds Hezbollah in Lebanon, and it funds the Houthis. Other Iranian-backed groups have been attacking US troops in the Middle East since November. How monumentally stupid do you have to be to keep giving tens of billions of dollars to an outfit that then uses that money to attack the West? Then you come to Australia. Defence Minister Richard Marles said earlier today that Australia supported the attack by the US and the UK.
The actions that have been taken today, supported by Australia, are about maintaining freedom of navigation on the high seas. They are about maintaining global trade. And that is completely central to Australia's national interest.
But remember that only a few weeks ago, the US asked the Albanese government to send warships to the Red Sea to help in its peacekeeping mission, and we refused to do so. Instead, we sent a handful of defence personnel. And as things are heating up, the Houthis are getting more and more bolshy, we still refuse to send a warship. We set up AUKUS as an alliance of Western military allies to look out for the interests of the West. And when we're called upon to do our bit, we're effectively missing in action. We should be sending a warship up there right now. This was Shadow Treasurer Angus Taylor today.
We remain deeply concerned that this weak Prime Minister and weak government is not taking the action they should. They haven't provided a ship. This is not just a national security issue, which it clearly is. It's a global security issue. It's also a prosperity issue, a cost of living issue, because if we lose those sea lanes, we're all going to pay more for everything.
And then you have the dopey Greens. Their defence spokesman David Shoebridge said today, quote, "The Biden and Albanese administrations repeatedly say they want to avoid the conflict in Gaza spreading in the region. Then they do this. The hypocrisy is astounding and damaging to both nations' credibility. Supporting the bombing of one of the only ports in a country that desperately needs to receive medicine, food and supplies is horrific. In the context of Yemen, it's an effective death sentence for thousands of people." Now, the Greens would presumably prefer for global trade to come to a standstill and for us to just sit idly by while Islamist terrorists attack the West. But we've always known they're a bunch of self-loathing, anti-Western frauds.